Hi, my name is Bella Carrasco, and helping others feel confident about investing brings a huge smile to my face. After working in the private equity, family office, and securities markets for nearly a decade, I am breaking down the world of money, investing, and financial freedom. Work optionality isn't a dream, it's a decision you make today. I bring you actionable tips, expert interviews, and enlightening strategies to help you get richer and stay that way. This is the How Do You Know podcast. And this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult with a qualified financial professional for advice specific to your situation. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast producers or sponsors. We make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy or completeness of the content. A lot of us want all of the financial chips so we can get wealthy and stay wealthy. But what most people don't consider is the soft skills that are important to keep you there. This is not only helpful with your portfolio overall, but also your career and for your relationships. That's including your romantic relationships, your friendships, and you as an employee. So today we are talking with Bill, who has a track record of growing businesses from small startups to large Fortune 100 companies. He has held a wide variety of C-level and senior executive positions in the US and abroad for companies like IBM and GE. He has served on public and private boards, has lived and worked in over 24 countries, and now has a coaching and mentoring group for CEOs. So, Bill, thank you so much for being here today.
Boy, Bella, I'm exhausted just listening to that. I got to take a break. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very impressive resume that you've built up. So very grateful that you've dedicated some time to help us here today. So my first question to you is just what soft skills do you see missing from most of the leaders that you've worked with?
Boy, well, that's a great question. Soft skills. I don't often get asked about that, but um, I've worked with a lot of companies in these years, and I can recall at one time, not too long ago, I had a CEO that I was coaching, and golly, this guy, he could look at a dashboard a mile away and instantly
Mm,
tell you what the cash flow was down to the penny. He
wow.
was brilliant. But here's the catch: his team that he actually handpicked generally avoided him, and he cut people off. He didn't let them finish their statements. He was the kind of guy that knew he was brilliant, and he created an atmosphere where people just had problems dealing with him. And eventually, a major thing happened in the company, and he didn't find out about it until it was, quote unquote, a little too late. And that was because no one trusted him enough to bring the truth forward to him in real time.
Uh,
So as I started to think about this, we coaching him, I realized his missing skill was listening. And I don't mean just hearing, I mean deep, well, I do mean hearing, not just listening. I mean
mhm.
deep listening, trying to understand what people are saying and giving them the time to say what they've got to say, where people actually feel safe around you in saying what they've got to say. So we worked with him both in the group and in one-on-ones, and he became a lot better leader as a result of that. So in a nutshell, I'd say the magic is all about listening.
And to your point, it's not only listening but hearing and being detailed with that. And that leads me to another question, which is what is emotional intelligence and why is it even important?
Wow, I should have put my psychologist hat on before this discussion. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not going to give you the dictionary definition of emotional intelligence, but I'll tell you, I had a CEO once that could catch a decimal error at 50 paces. Not the same guy as before, but a different guy. But he couldn't run his team because they were burning out in front of him.
Mm,
And within about 6 months, half of them were gone. And the numbers didn't sink him, but his lack of empathy for his team did. Now, I don't mean sympathy, I mean empathy. So what is emotional intelligence? I think emotional intelligence, in a nutshell, is being smart with your emotions, yours and others. It's about self regulation, it's about empathy and adjusting to the instance or the environment that you're in. There's an old saying, I read it a long time ago. I can't recall where, but it goes something like this, where IQ may get you into the room, but EQ is what keeps you in
Mm,
there and gets you promoted. So when you think of it, EQ, emotional intelligence, I guess in today's terms, is the Bluetooth or it's the Wi-Fi for leadership. It's the connection point that you've got to have it. If it's weak, if you got a bad Wi-Fi connection, nobody connects. And so that's my view of what emotional intelligence is. Do you connect?
that's a brilliant quote. I really like that. And it's interesting that in both scenarios you've mentioned so far, it's not that the person wasn't brilliant and very good at what they do. It's just this other whole side of the equation that some people don't even realize is important. So when you're working with people like that, what is the top tip you give them when it comes to coaching on what I'll call this self-awareness concept?
The top tip is, from a self awareness point of view, it's more than just looking into a mirror. You can't self regulate when you're looking into a mirror. You need people, you need a coach, you need people that you trust giving you unfiltered response, and being that kind of trusted environment where you know that they've got your back. We have a word for it in Vistage. We call it carefrontational. And you can imagine carefrontational is a fun way of confronting someone, but in a caring way. So when it comes to self-awareness and emotional intelligence, I believe that you need to have a network around you to help you fine tune it. Get that Wi-Fi signal fine tuned to what's going on around you.
And a lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with communication as well. So, are there any communication failures that you typically see and ways to mitigate them?
Yeah, we that's one thing we do all the time. We're doing it right now. Is we communicate as humans and as leaders. The effectiveness of our communication is, to a large degree, what makes us successful or not. It's the transmitter that we have. There's two things: a transmitter and a receiver. And the transmitter's got to transmit at a certain frequency, and the receiver needs to tune into that frequency with clarity. So, one of the biggest issues that I see with communication is that the leader is assuming that he or she is speaking at the same frequency of her
Mm,
recipients, and basically has the mindset of saying, hey, I'm tuned in, I said it once, they should get it.
yeah.
Well, that's not always true. And the other leader I see, the other failure I see in communication is what I call burying the message. And sometimes when there's bad news to be delivered,
Mm,
a leader will give it, the poo-poo sandwich, where there's good stuff in the beginning and the poo-poo's in the middle and there's good stuff at the end. And she buries the message in a litany of other things and then assumes that the message has been delivered, but there's too much noise around the message for it to be clear. And and I think the last part of it, and we all do it, is when there's bad news to be delivered, we duck the hard stuff. We
yeah.
avoid the hard stuff. And if you do this once in a generation, not the end of the world, but if your reputation starts to become the person that avoids the tough conversations, then what you
Yeah.
get in your team is really resentment because your team wants to hear this. They want to hear the
Mm,
good news and the not so good news. So they've got to feel that they can trust you and that when you are communicating, you're not burying the signal. You're not assuming that your message is clear. You're testing it, and that you're not avoiding the bad news.
right. Yeah, I know it's extremely hard to be the one delivering that sometimes, but clarity is kindness. And so in those situations, you're almost better off delivering it that way. And I'm sure there's ways of doing things and ways of doing things, and tone is very important. And there's ways to actually approach what you're saying, but not without burying the message, I guess, so to speak. In terms of what you were starting off by saying, if someone is trying to communicate and you see that the people that report to you respond differently to different communication styles, is it mostly trial and error, or is it mostly just being aware of it, or how would you guide someone through that?
Yeah, I think the first step is awareness. We need to identify what the topic or issue is before we can address it. And so when I'm talking to folks that I'm coaching or working with, I have to be careful in not assuming something and working on that assumption. I need to be clear with them as to what what it is we both see before we can work on it. So communication is extraordinarily important, not only in our business life but our personal lives as well.
Yeah.
So it's important to have that clarity and to be tuning into the right frequencies.
Right. Yes. I know in my personal relationships, I like to do regular check-ins, and it's very obvious when those check-ins fall off the map. The communication between the two, your like the frequency and the Wi-Fi that you refer to, and the analogy there is so good because you really do get on a different page, and it's always nice to wrangle it back in every now and again.
Well, even on that, I've been blessed with a wonderful wife, and we've been married for a long time. However, I can't assume that we're always in sync on matters of importance. So, what I do, and it drives her crazy, is I call it a same page meeting. And right before we have to either make a decision together or get in front of someone, even a contractor or something, I kind of pull her in and say, let's have a same page meeting to make sure that we're delivering a clear message to whomever we want to deliver it to, and are transmitting at the same frequency.
It seems so silly, but it is important because, like you said, people can be on completely different pages, and you're going this way, the other person's going that way, and you wouldn't have known.
Right, exactly.
You also just mentioned Vistage, and I know a part of that curriculum is you covering executive presence. I know that's important because it's how you build trust and enhances your ability to lead, which in turn then helps your career, your growth, and your financial opportunities from there. So, what's an activity you typically engage with your mentoring groups that help hone this skill?
Well, the first thing we talk about in our vistage groups and in life is what is executive presence and why
Mm,
does it even count? Why does it matter?
hmm
So many folks today say, "Hey, look, I don't care about executive presence. I don't want to be an executive, and I don't care what that means." However, when you think about it, it's not a Mad Men episode as to what folks look like on Madison Avenue in the executive presence is really clear, calm, authentic leadership under pressure.
mm,
In my words, it's a presence that exudes trust. And so in my groups, we have a fun little exercise which I call the CNN drill, and occasionally I'll pop it on them, when they're not expecting. And the question that I give them 90 seconds. Stand up. The lights have gone on. The microphones are in front of you. We're rolling. Why should your company exist, Joe?
mm,
And how Joe answers that is what executive presence is. Joe
mm,
wasn't expecting that answer, that question. He wasn't expecting it. And how does he react under pressure in a way that exudes trust? Now, Joe and Frank and Susie and everybody else, they generally don't always get it the first time. And so we go around the room a couple of times on this. And generally by the third time, you're getting some really good stuff. So,
mm.
executive presence is something you have to not only be aware of, subscribe to, tune into, but practice. It's
Yeah.
not something that oftentimes comes naturally. It's something that has got to be worked on.
I like the key word there for me is pressure because it's fine if everything's going dandy, but the only thing certain in life is that there is going to be uncertainty involved. And so the way that you can mitigate against that is like you said, being prepared and trying to find the ways that you can appease yourself when those situations will inevitably arise. So is that something that people can just practice on their own and do those sorts of things, or what do you think is the best way to keep that tool sharpened?
Well, certainly now with technology, with Teams and Zoom and videos, you can certainly practice it a little bit, but it's that pressure part of it that
Yeah.
oftentimes is missing. There's a flip side to that executive presence that's also important. I call it the dark side, where you have that confidence, but then you come across as arrogant,
Yeah.
and that's why there's a Goldilocks portion to all of this, right? You can't be too hot and arrogant and self confident and come across like a know it all. And you can't be on the other side either, which is not productive for a leader to be either. So you got to find that Goldilocks zone, and that's why with the my CNN drill, 90 seconds on the spot without preparation, it's practice. It's I believe that practice in this case will never make perfect, but certainly helps a lot.
Oh, and to your point on the Goldilocks scenario, I'm sure it quickly humbles most people.
Well, yeah.
And in your mentoring groups, there's also this concept of execution because it's great. Okay, I know I need to be emotionally intelligent. I know to be confident but not arrogant. But you actually have to now practice what you're preaching. You actually have to carry it through. So, in the execution piece, what do people typically struggle with the most there?
Well, nothing gets done unless there's execution, right?
Yeah.
All the planning in the world doesn't accomplish anything other than planning. Strategies are so important, but strategies don't get you there. The only thing that gets you there is execution, whether it's in the boardroom or whether it's in the military or whether it's in family life. You're talking to your children. It's not how are you going to do your homework, is did you get your homework done? Yes or no?
Right.
In the military, in the boardroom, we all know that it's the results that count. There was a great author, John Doerr, who wrote a book called Objective Measure What Matters. And he talked a lot about objectives and key results. And of course, the KPIs are things that we think about all the time, but those are the activities that get us
Mm,
to the key results. And it's all about the key results, and that's execution. I remember a coaching client once. He wasn't a Vistage client, but a coaching client once. We were working on strategic planning, and so he delivered to me a 42-page strategy deck with, boy, the slickest graphics, the best buzzwords that I had ever seen. And I asked him directly, I said, what are your top three priorities? And what are the key results that are going to measure those priorities? And he had a hard time answering them. He struggled. I said, so what is the value of this presentation? And he goes, well, this is my strategy deck. I said, this isn't strategy, it's wallpaper. For heaven's sakes, if you can't articulate, what the key results are going to be and how you're going to deliver the key results, it's just wallpaper. And
mm,
so he struggled with that a little bit. Um, and someone said once that execution dies in the fog of too many priorities. So
mm.
the trick here is focus. And the trick is to chunk it out with small things that you can do. Atomic Habits was a great book that talked
Yeah.
about things like that. If you boil it down to two or three things that you need to accomplish every week, and you do that, and little by little by little, execution is the key, and it will get you to where those key results need to be.
It's like when you have too many options, you go into overload mode and don't even start at all. So
Right.
having the 2 to 3 priorities is a way to distill it down, make it more digestible. In Atomic Habits, I like the habit stacking concept. So take something you already are doing and just add one more little
Mm.
thing on top of that. That's where I've seen the most success in things that I've tried to implement too.
You know,
One of my Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to add to that, which you know about, that I'll just remind you of.
Yeah, let's do it.
That is the concept of accountability groups.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So, one of the things that we are notorious for in Vistage and in my coaching practice is to help people execute. So, at the end of every meeting, it isn't about what you think you learned, but what you're really taking away from it. And so we
Mm-hmm.
have two things that encourage us to get stuff done. One is to write down what actions you are planning on taking related to this gold nugget or moment of epiphany you've just had, and writing it down on what we call a personal action summary. And the second thing is accountability groups that will be your support network, your net, if you will, underneath the High Wire Act that will be confrontational to you and help you remember that you committed to doing these things and give you a little nudge every now and then to get it done. In my practice and in Vistage, we believe, it's all about execution. So we do everything we can to help that.
Is that the most successful accountability system you've seen, is just to take three things that you've learned and then have a group of some sort to make sure that they're holding you accountable for those things?
Yeah, the accountability groups are literally second to none.
Yeah.
And in business, sure, you can organize accountability groups as well. And sometimes though, when you engage an external coach, and I've had the opportunity of doing this on numerous occasions, what I sometimes do to help the team execute is I facilitate like 15 or 20-minute Monday huddles
Mm,
where we all know what we committed to do. And let's just quickly go around the room, red or green. We either did not do it
mm,
or we did it, right? And there's no such thing as yellow. Yellow is in the process of doing. No, that does not
mm.
have a time or a place in this huddle. It's either you got it done or you didn't get it done. And what I typically encourage the leader to do in these huddles is very quickly say, for those that have got a green, acknowledge the green. Oftentimes, as a leader, we tend to focus on the reds, not the greens.
Yeah.
So when it comes to accountability, let's acknowledge the greens and say, Bella, congratulations, you got a green. How long are you going to keep it green? Or if it's red, say, when is it going to turn green? Will it be green by next week? Well, no, sir, it's not going to be green by next week. Well, when do you think it will be green? Do you have the resources? Do you have the authority? Do you have the skill to turn it green on your own, or do you need help?
Yeah.
And if you need help, let's schedule another meeting. Let's not do it in the huddle. So the huddle is a way of just getting to the execution part of the equation and making sure that stuff is getting done.
I like that so much because it's so simple and it, like you said, 20 minutes. Like it doesn't take that much time. It's either yes or no. And if it's a no, why not? Let's get you to a yes. And if it is yes, celebrate the wins. That's equally as important thing to do. So it should be a pretty simple process to implement.
There's so many books that have been written lately, whether it's physical training, mental health, leadership, and every one of them, if you want to get a common thread, I've noticed every one of them talks about accountability and execution. It
Mm,
works when it's frequent, when it's simple, and when it's
yeah.
public. And when it's public, it doesn't work if it's complicated, if it's not frequent, and if it's not public. So those three things are what I believe make for effective accountability sessions.
Right. Yeah, it goes off that concept we were just talking about execution. Just make it one or two things, and part of that is the simplicity of it. So if you want to be accountable for it, then make that a simple process too.
Right? The old thought. I had someone say this one day. They said, "Hey, Bill, you talk about accountability and you talk about public. So, accountability. These are promises that are public." I said, yeah,
Hmm.
one way of looking at it. you know.
It means a lot more when it's not just written in your deep, dark, secret notebook.
And the other thing is consequences. There's one thing in recognizing when people achieve certain things. However, we all know as children growing up, sometimes our
Yeah.
parents had consequences when we didn't do our homework or we didn't do things that we said we were going to do. And it's the same thing in business where if you don't have the consequences that are commensurate with the reward systems that you have, then you got a glass half full. So I'm not saying that we have to be super hard or super tough, but I am saying that rewards without consequences for failure somehow, some way, are just half half a glass of half full.
Right. You even look at different governments around the world. So I'm just thinking about Singapore, for example. You go to jail if you have gum on the road. So there are very intense consequences for not keeping the city clean. And as a result, you don't really find gum in Singapore.
Yeah, that's very
Well,
true.
let's end with a quick three-question fire round. The first will be what is a book or podcast that you've recently read or listened to that you found compelling?
Boy, I tell you, I read quite a bit, and I absorb books several ways. I've got my Kindle, I've got real books, and I've got audio books, and I vacillate between fiction, nonfiction, business, whatever. So I wouldn't be doing the answer justice if I threw a book out. There's just so many good books out there. But I'll tell you one podcast I found
Hmm,
I really like besides yours. I think yours is my favorite.
good answer.
Yours is my second favorite is
There you go.
a podcast called Acquired. Have you heard of that?
That is my favorite podcast. I am so happy
Every
you said
company
that.
has a story, and you get
Yeah.
3 to 4 hour deep
Yeah.
dives in the history of these companies. I find that fascinating, and the two folks that do it, I forget their names right now. They do such a wonderful job in point counterpoint and keeping those
Yep.
3 to 4 hours really moving. The name of it is Acquired. I love it.
They have industries of all kinds from the NFL to Rolex to Enron. Google AI is one that recently came out, so I'm also a big fan.
Right, right. Big fan. But yours is my favorite by far.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. Did not pay you to say that.
Nope, you did not pay me to say that.
Second question, a little bit easier. What is your favorite restaurant?
In Austin, there's so many good restaurants here.
Mm-hmm.
I like steaks, so I like Perry's for a nice evening, beautiful ambiance, great steaks, and I like Three Forks in town, which is
Oh, very
kind of
yum.
established. And my barbecue go-to place, of course, is Southside Market Barbecue. They've been around for,
Really? I've never been there.
oh, they started out in Elgin. They've been around for over 130 years, third generation running it, and it's just really good stuff. They've got about 4 or 5 places around the area. Southside Market.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't stay in business for that long if you have a bad product, so that speaks volumes.
Exactly.
Last question is how do you stay up to date on current events or the news?
Wow. Um, I can tell you that one area that has disappointed me lately, and that's YouTube. Uh,
Hmm.
YouTube, and the thing that's disappointed me is I discovered how good these deep fakes are right now. Where some of the my favorite video podcasters are being deep faked.
Oh, that's terrible.
And so, there's a long-term thought behind that. Like, my goodness, if the deep fakes are so good that you really can't tell the difference anymore, then what
Yeah.
confidence are we going to have in the whole video audio medium any longer? That's a
Right.
whole different level question.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
what I
it's scary to think about.
yeah, what I do is I try and look at 3 or 4 things every morning to try and keep myself centered, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. Um,
Right.
I uh, I read Drudge Report. I scan it. I read the Wall Street Journal. I scan it. I always read the opinion pages. I scan the front page. For fun things that go back to my past in New York City, I go to the New York Post periodically and just get a fun little picture view of the world. It's kind of like my cartoons of the news, so it's a different approach. So I try to get contrarian points of view. And lately I've been going to News Nation a bit, and I always go to BBC too. So I try to get the world perspective from BBC.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't heard of some of those, so I'm excited to explore those and add them to my repertoire.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. You have been a wealth of knowledge. Why and how should people reach out to you?
Well, gee, that's a really good question. I think the why is if something that I've said either sparks your interest or you want to discuss it more with me, the easiest way to connect is just shoot me an email. I'm still in the email generation, sorry. And the best way to get me is just through my Vistage email, which is bill.larosa@vistageshare.com. If you want to read a little bit of what I have written over the years, I do have a blog.
That's perfect. Well, thank you again. I hope people realize the importance of these soft skills in addition to the other hard skills as a way of preserving and growing wealth. So until next time, adios. Thank you for tuning in today. If you found any value and want to support the podcast, I would be forever grateful if you texted someone the link. You can say that you have a podcast episode that may be interesting for them. Also, if you have questions or topics you want covered, please don't hesitate to reach out on LinkedIn or Instagram. Remember that every step makes a difference. I hope that you continue to learn how to get richer and stay that way.